The story of Mark, a tale of injustice and separation. Mark had always been a humble man, living in a quiet town where he worked tirelessly to provide for his family. He was a loving husband to Leah, and together they had 2 young children, Sam and Grace. The family lived a modest life, filled with laughter, love, and an unshakable bond that only strengthened with time. Mark's dreams were simple. He wanted to raise his children well and create a stable future for them. But fate had other plans. It began one quiet evening when Mark was arrested. His life suddenly turned upside down. The accusations were grave, and the evidence against him was flimsy at best. Mark had been accused of a crime he hadn't committed, one that carried serious implications for national security. In the blink of an eye, he went from being a beloved community member to a man feared by his own neighbors. The details of the crime were murky, but what was clear was that Mark had been framed. The authorities, knowing of his long-standing political beliefs and quiet opposition to the corrupt government, saw him as a threat. They couldn't have him speaking out and couldn't allow his views to inspire others, so they concocted a story, a narrative they would sell to the public that Mark was involved in an underground movement, aiming to disrupt the country's fragile peace. They planted false evidence, created false witnesses, and twisted facts to fit their agenda. The charges against him were similar to those once laid upon the great Nelson Mandela: accusations of terrorism, treason, and sabotage. The similarity wasn't lost on Mark, though it brought him little comfort. The very same system that had wronged Mandela was now turning its gears against him, and he could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. He was the new scapegoat, the one they hoped would be silenced forever. As Mark sat in the cold, dark prison cell, he thought of his family. Leah, who had always been his rock, was now left to navigate a world where the man she loved was labeled a criminal. His children, innocent and full of hope, would soon grow up without the father they adored. The thought of them made Mark's heart ache. The trial was swift, the verdict predetermined. Mark was found guilty, not based on any evidence, but on the strength of the fabricated story the government had built. The courtroom was filled with a sense of disbelief and despair. Mark's lawyer, a brave man named Peter, fought valiantly, but the system was too corrupt, and the odds were too great. When the sentence was handed down, life in prison, Mark knew that the government had not just imprisoned him, they had imprisoned his entire family. Leah was left to fend for herself. Sam and Grace would grow up with only fragments of memories of their father. The division that the authorities had hoped for had already begun. Mark was removed from his family, but the real tragedy was how the emotional distance, the fear, and the stigma would tear at the fabric of their lives. Mark spent years in prison, watching as the world outside changed. He wrote letters to his family, pouring his heart into words, hoping they would understand that he wasn't a criminal, that he hadn't betrayed them. But as time passed, the letters stopped arriving. Leah's visits became less frequent, and then they ceased altogether. His family, once united in love, was now a shadow of what it had been. In the outside world, whispers spread that Mark was guilty. The government used his case as a warning to others who might dare to challenge their authority. The nation watched, the public divided. Some believed in his innocence, others in his guilt. But few knew the truth. The truth was that Mark had been framed, used as a pawn in a much larger game. Years went by, and Mark's health began to deteriorate in the prison, but something kept him going. He still held on to the hope that one day the truth would be revealed. His case would be revisited, and his innocence would be proven, and that hope, no matter how small, kept the flame of his spirit alive. Then, after a long, grueling struggle, a new wave of political change swept through the country. A fresh government, one that believed in justice and accountability, came to power. Investigations into the past injustices began, and Mark's case was re-examined. Slowly, the truth started to emerge. The lies, the falsified evidence, and the corruption were all exposed. Mark's innocence was finally proven, but it was too late. By the time he was released from prison, his family had already been scattered. Leah, having lost hope long ago, had remarried. Sam and Grace, now young adults, had grown up with the pain of a missing father, a shadow that lingered over them. Throughout their lives, the separation was irreversible, the wounds too deep to heal. Mark wandered through the streets of his old town, searching for his family, but it felt like searching for ghosts.